What do you do when your wife turns your marriage into a party game, flirting with a stranger for a bet while her friends film your humiliation and then tells everyone you are the problem for reacting? How far can a calm husband go, using only patience and the law, when he is painted as controlling and bitter while the video of his overreaction goes viral in their circle? What happens when the day finally comes that she is handed papers in front of the other parents at school pickup and the game stops being funny? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Lyle Armitage, and until that night I honestly believed I understood my life well enough. It was not exciting, but it was clear. I worked at the auto shop, I checked estimates twice, I kept track of numbers and dates. I came home, and I tried to be present for my daughter and my wife. I told myself that being steady was better than being wild, and that responsibility was just another word for love. The night of the bet started like any other Friday, with me at the kitchen counter making Maya's toast and Sienna moving through the apartment like she was getting ready for a stage show. The table that usually held Maya's homework was covered in makeup palettes, a curling iron, and Sienna's phone lying face up, buzzing with messages from her friends. Tess was on speaker, and the two of them talked about a girls' night, about proving that Sienna still had energy, about making the evening fun, which in their language always meant loud and filmed. While I spread jam on bread, Sienna told Tess that I was already asking about what time she would be home. She made it sound like I was checking a curfew, not planning our daughter's bedtime. She said her friends thought I took things too seriously and that I needed to relax. I did not argue. I said that I only wanted to know when the front door would open, because Maya sometimes woke up from bad dreams, and it helped to reassure her. Sienna replied that constant questions felt like chains, and that any more of them would prove I was the problem, not her. Tess laughed through the speaker, and the sound bounced off the kitchen walls. At one point, while Sienna was swapping one pair of earrings for another, her phone lit up with a calendar alert. The words flashed for a second. Skyline Lounge, 9:20 p.m., with a line under it that said, "Meeting, personal." She tapped it away so quickly she probably thought I had not seen it, but I work with small details every day, so the time and place stuck in my mind. I did not ask about it, because I was tired of every simple question becoming evidence of control or jealousy. Instead, I rinsed Maya's plate and helped her climb into her chair. Maya looked at her mother's bright dress and careful hair and asked why she needed so much shine just to see her friends. Sienna said that sometimes a person needed to feel like more than a mother, and that a woman could not spend her whole life making sandwiches. Maya looked confused, because in her mind, making sandwiches and being a mother were not shameful things. I told Maya that adults sometimes liked noisy rooms, but that our quiet home mattered too, and that both could exist if people were careful. Sienna rolled her eyes and turned up a playlist on her phone. Later, I took Maya to her bedroom, where glow-in-the-dark stars sat on the ceiling. I read her a simple story, while the sound of Sienna's laughter and music drifted down the hallway. Maya asked why people laughed when they talked about making me jealous. She had heard parts of a conversation between Sienna and Tess where my reaction was treated like a joke in advance. I told Maya that sometimes grown-ups made jokes because they did not want to look directly at their own behavior, and that this had nothing to do with her worth or her place in our family. She asked if I was angry that Sienna was going out again. I told her that anger would not fix anything, and that my job was to make sure she felt safe, not to chase her mother around the city. After she finally fell asleep, one hand loosely holding my wrist, I stayed in the dark a little longer, listening to her breathing and the muffled sound of high heels on the wooden floor. When I came back to the kitchen, Sienna was by the door with her coat in her hand and her phone buzzing in a group chat. She scrolled through photos of her friends' outfits and sent one of her own, posing in the hallway mirror. I saw, over her shoulder, a line of text in the chat where Tess said they should make the night interesting, test how much attention they could get, maybe set a challenge. Sienna typed a quick response, something about being ready to prove she still had it, and then slipped the phone into her small bag. She told me not to blow up her phone with needy messages, because that would only embarrass her and prove her friends right. I said that I hoped she had a safe night and that she would let me know if she needed a ride. She replied that she could handle herself. Then she opened the door, stepped into the hallway, and let it close behind her with a soft final click. After she left, the apartment felt bigger and emptier at the same time. I picked up my mug, rinsed it, and walked over to the small desk in the corner of the living room. On the shelf above it sat a thin binder labeled Utilities that was already slightly thicker than it should have been, and next to it a simple folder marked Household. I did not open either of them, but I let my fingers rest on the spines for a moment. Then I sat down and checked a few work emails on my laptop, pushing aside the uneasy thought that the alert about Skyline Lounge might matter. A little later, my phone buzzed with a message from a coworker saying they were heading to that same rooftop bar to celebrate a small promotion. He said it would be just a drink or two, nothing wild, and that I should drop by if I could. I thought about it for a minute. Part of me wanted to stay home and pretend ignorance. Another part of me, the part that hated being turned into a story without my voice, decided it was better to see reality than to live only with edited versions. I arranged for my parents to stay with Maya for a few hours, explaining that Sienna was out with friends and I needed to check in at work drinks. They did not ask many questions, only reminded me to drive carefully. Later, I found myself walking through the entrance of the Skyline Lounge, up the stairs to the rooftop terrace. Music thumped through the floor, and colored lights crossed the faces of people standing in clusters around high tables. I greeted my coworkers, who were already halfway through their first round, and stayed with them long enough to be polite. Then I drifted toward the back, near the hallway that led to the restrooms and service stairs. From that shadowed corner, I could see a wide section of the terrace without being obvious. I spotted Sienna quickly. She stood near the bar with Tess and a small group, laughing, her dress bright under the string lights. Tess was explaining something to the circle, moving her hands like she was drawing a plan. I realized slowly that they were arranging a bet, something about Sienna walking up to a man and flirt dancing with him until he bought them a drink and offered his number. They wanted to prove she could still pull easily, even as a married woman. Sienna laughed and nodded, tossing her hair back. Tess held up her phone, camera already recording. The man they chose was standing at the bar, broad-shouldered, relaxed, unaware he had been made into a challenge. Sienna walked toward him with a slow sway, her friends watching and cheering from their table. I felt my chest tighten, but I did not storm out or demand an explanation. Instead, I raised my own phone, kept my breathing steady, and began to quietly record from the hallway as Sienna pressed close to the stranger, moving with the music, while her friends turned my marriage into a game. As the song ended and the man signaled for a round of shots, my phone buzzed in my hand with a new notification, a preview from Tess's group chat describing how they would enjoy watching me look crazy when I found out, before the message faded back into the glare and noise of the bar. On Saturday morning, the hangover in our house was not from alcohol, at least not for me, but from the kind of tired that sits behind your eyes and makes every sound feel a little too sharp. Sienna slept late, her phone face down on the nightstand, buzzing every few minutes with new notifications. I made pancakes for Maya, listened to her talk about a drawing she wanted to do, and pretended my mind was not replaying the scene from the rooftop bar in slow motion. At some point, while I was wiping syrup from the table, Sienna drifted into the kitchen in an oversized t-shirt, hair pulled up, sunglasses on, even though we were indoors. She said she was tired, that the night had been wild but harmless. She did not mention the bet, the stranger, or the way Tess had framed the whole thing. Instead, she talked about how her friends had reminded her she still had something special, how she needed that kind of energy because life at home was suffocating sometimes. When I did not take the bait and stayed quiet, she sighed and said my sulking was exactly why everyone thought I was controlling. She mentioned that Tess had already posted some clips and that the girls' group chat was loving it. I washed plates and told myself I would look later when I was alone and steady enough to actually see what they had turned us into. On Monday, back at the auto shop, the public version of the story hit me before lunchtime. I had barely put my bag in my locker and logged into the computer when I heard two of the guys at the front desk snickering over something on a phone. Usually I ignore that kind of thing, but then I heard Sienna's laugh, recorded and tinny, and my name mentioned in the same breath as the word jealous. When I walked over, they tried to close the screen, but one of them, probably meaning no harm, turned it back toward me and said they had not realized it was my wife until halfway through. On the screen, Tess's video played in a loop. It showed Sienna walking up to the stranger, Evan, touching his arm, dancing close. The caption across the bottom said that this is what happens when you put a ring on a girl who still has it, and the text above said, "Bet night with the queen. Her husband is going to lose his mind." It cut to a short clip of me in the far background, half in shadow, turning away from the bar. Tess had tagged me and Sienna and added a line about how some men cannot handle a harmless bet. My coworkers laughed in that uneasy way people laugh when they know they probably should not. They said it was just a joke, and I should be proud my wife was so popular. I nodded once, said I had work to do, and walked away before I said anything I could not take back. During my first break, I went to the corner of the open plan office where we kept a spare computer for parts orders and customer emails. I opened my own phone, found the full story from Tess, and watched it on mute. The edited clip was shorter than reality, but it told a complete story. Sienna as the confident, fun wife, Evan as the flattered stranger, the friends as cheering audience, and me as the background shadow whose feelings did not matter. The part where I filmed from the hallway, tight in the chest, did not exist in her version. I used the screen recording function, catching the entire sequence with the captions and tags, and saved it to my phone's gallery. Then I opened my cloud storage app and uploaded it to a folder I had created over the weekend, a simple one named Archive A. A message popped up at the top of the screen saying file uploaded successfully and disappeared again. After that, I plugged a small USB stick into the office computer, copied the clip along with a few screenshots of comments calling me controlling and overdramatic, and then labeled the stick with the date using a piece of tape. When no one was looking, I slipped it into the back pocket of my work folder, behind some tax forms, like it was just another piece of paperwork. Around mid-morning, my phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. I looked at the screen for a second. Harbor Room, 11:05 a.m., meeting, personal. I had set that myself after a quiet call in the stairwell a few days earlier, when I had first decided I needed information, not just anger. The reminder felt heavier now, knowing that the simple humiliation at the bar had grown teeth and walked into my workplace and my child's social world. I dismissed the alert and got back to estimates, doubling the numbers in my head just to be sure they were right, the same way I was slowly doubling and checking the details of my own life. At lunch, I walked to the supermarket down the street to pick up a sandwich and some groceries. The line at the checkout was slow, and my mind wandered until I heard my name. I turned and saw one of the mothers from Maya's class, holding a basket and smiling like we were in on a friendly joke. She said she had seen Sienna's video and thought it was hilarious, that not many women could pull off a dance like that and still keep a straight face at home. She added, in a light voice that did not feel light at all, that she hoped I was not too strict with Sienna, because everyone deserves to have fun sometimes. She said the word strict carefully, like she was repeating something she had heard. I realized then how far Sienna's narrative had already spread. I told the woman that I did not discuss my marriage in the supermarket and wished her a good day. Her smile went stiff, and she turned back to the shelves, suddenly very interested in the labels on a cereal box. The second half of the day at the shop felt tighter. Every time someone laughed across the office, part of me wondered if they were laughing about us. At one point, I saw Derek, my line manager, standing in the doorway of his glass-walled office, watching me with a thoughtful frown. A few minutes later, he asked if we could talk when I had a moment. I finished entering the last estimate, saved the document, and went in. He closed the door halfway, leaving it a little open, as if that would cloak the seriousness of the conversation. He said he had seen something online over the weekend and wanted to check in. He did not describe the video in detail, but his face told me enough. He said he did not want details about my personal life, only to know if things at home would affect my work or lead to any incidents around the shop. I told him I was tired and embarrassed, but not unstable, and that my work was still my work. I added that I did not appreciate being turned into office gossip through someone else's posts. He nodded, said he understood more than he could say, and that if I needed a day off at any point, I should tell him before I crashed. The conversation ended with a quiet understanding. He would not dig further, and I would not let the chaos spill into the workshop. After my shift, I drove home through slow traffic, the late afternoon light throwing long lines across the dashboard. In the apartment stairwell, on the landing between floors, I stopped for a second and leaned against the cool wall. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from the contact I had saved as just an emoji, the same person connected to the meeting personal reminders. The message was short, asking if I had managed to gather timestamps and copies of any posts or messages from the night of the bet. I typed back that I had video, screenshots, and a basic list of who was present. I kept my language simple, just facts. Then I slipped the phone back into my pocket and climbed the rest of the stairs. When I opened the apartment door, the first thing I heard was Sienna's voice coming from the kitchen. She was on a call, speaker on, telling someone that her husband was being dramatic about one stupid dance, that he had sulked and made her feel guilty instead of admitting it was funny. The person on the other end, probably Tess or Nora, laughed and said something I did not catch. I walked past the doorway without stepping inside, heading straight for Maya's room to check her homework. My phone vibrated in my hand. When I glanced at the screen, I saw a notification from Tess's group chat at the top. She had tagged me and Sienna in a new video, a shortened loop of the flirt dance with big text overlaid that said, "Imagine losing your mind over a bet like this." Below it, more tags and laughing emojis. At almost the same moment, an email alert from Derek popped up with the subject line, "Check-in." I stood in the hallway between the kitchen and Maya's door, the sound of Sienna's laughter mixing with the soft ping of my phone, and realized that what started as a private ache in a dark bar had become a public story that would not go away on its own. A few days after the rooftop bar, another invitation appeared in the group chat, this time for a birthday dinner at a family restaurant. It was for a mutual friend, the kind of person I actually liked, so refusing without reason would have created even more questions. Sienna said we should go so people could see that everything was fine, that we were a normal couple who could laugh about things. She said her friends were already joking about how I had almost ruined girls' night with my mood, and she wanted to show them she was not letting me control her. I did not like the idea, but I also knew that if I stayed home, the story would grow bigger in my absence. So I ironed a shirt, helped Maya get ready for a night with my parents, and went with Sienna to the restaurant with my stomach tight and my face carefully neutral. The place was busy, full of clinking cutlery and low music. In the middle stood a long table already crowded with people from Sienna's circle. As we walked in, a few of them clapped and called out that the main characters of the bar saga had arrived. Someone said that here came the queen of the bet and her jealous husband, and there was laughter that made my skin feel too small. I pulled out Sienna's chair, sat beside her, and told myself to breathe slowly and watch. The dinner started harmlessly enough. People talked about work, weather, shows they were watching. Drinks kept appearing, glasses clinking in small toasts for nothing in particular. I noticed Tess at the far end of the table, phone always near her hand, eyes glancing between Sienna and me like she was waiting for a scene. Eventually, as I knew they would, someone asked Sienna to tell the story of the bet night again. They said that the clips had not been enough, that they wanted the full version straight from her. Tess tapped the side of her glass and announced that the floor belonged to Sienna. My wife stood up slightly, resting her hands on the table, face bright with attention. She began with the part about feeling trapped at home, about how she had forgotten what it felt like to be desired until her friends had pushed her to go out. She told them that I had already been grumpy before she left, that I had questioned her like a parent, and that she had decided to ignore me and have fun anyway. She did not mention Maya or the quiet bedtime question about why adults liked making people jealous. When she reached the bet, her voice became lighter, more dramatic. She described how Tess and the others had challenged her to prove she still had it by flirt-dancing with a stranger near the bar until he bought them a round of drinks. She said she had laughed and accepted, because why should married life mean acting like a ghost? People at the table laughed, nodding as if this was obviously true. She then described the stranger, Evan, calling him the test, the target, the perfect mark. She talked about how she had walked up to him, how his eyes had lit up, and how she had won the bet easily. She did not mention the part where she said she could make any man forget he had a wife. She did not mention that the man in question had his own life and perhaps family beyond being a prop in her story. Instead, she moved straight to the part where I became the villain. She told them that I had been lurking in the shadows like some horror character, that I had seen a small dance and acted like she had betrayed me, that I had walked off and sulked and punished her after the night ended. A few people shook their heads and said that men really could not handle their wives having harmless fun. Someone tapped their glass again and said they wanted to drink to freedom. During all of this, phones had appeared around the table. Tess recorded Sienna's retelling, likely from several angles, catching the laughter and the way the whole group leaned in when she mocked me. I saw flashes of my own face reflected in a nearby window, jaw tight, smile forced. At one point, a friend closer to my end asked if I had anything to say about the story, maybe my version. The tone made it clear they expected a joke or an apology. I said that I had already said everything I needed to say and that I did not think turning marriage into a game was funny. Sienna rolled her eyes and told them this was exactly what she meant, that I did not know how to take a joke. Nora, her mother, who had joined the dinner, laughed loudly and said that her daughter had always been too bright for gloomy men. She talked about how women like Sienna needed room to shine, that some husbands were simply afraid of that light. A few people nodded. One couple with kids stayed quiet and exchanged a look I could not fully read, but they did not speak up. Later in the dinner, one of the guests asked about the exact bet rules, wanting to know whether it had been about getting a free drink only or something more. Sienna brushed it aside, saying that the only thing that mattered was that she had won, and that I had made a fool of myself by overreacting. Tess added that the video showed everything anyone needed to see. Someone mentioned seeing me in the back of the clip, looking like I was about to explode. They laughed at that idea. I thought about the reality of how I had stood in the hallway, breathing slowly, deliberately not causing a scene, and understood that the version of me in their heads had already replaced the real one. Tess held up her phone again and said she could not wait to add tonight's toast to the highlight reel. She said her followers loved a good relationship drama, especially when the man looked ridiculous and the woman came out glowing. The noise around the table rose as the dessert came out, candles on a cake, a song, more clinking glasses. Sienna raised her glass once more and said that she wanted a toast to not letting anyone make her feel small, not even a husband. The whole table cheered, chanting for freedom again, for fun, for bets, and nights where responsibility did not exist. Someone behind me snapped a picture with a bright flash just as Sienna's arm went up and the light caught the lines of my face at the edge of the frame. It froze me for a second, like a small explosion in my mind. The moment moved on, but I knew that flash meant another image, another piece of evidence, this time of collective humiliation. When we got home that night, after the babysitting exchange and the awkward small talk at my parents' door, I lay awake in the guest bedroom, staring at the ceiling. Later, when the apartment was quiet, I took out my phone and opened Tess's profile. She had already posted a short clip from the dinner. It showed Sienna telling the bet story in her bright voice, the table shaking with laughter. I could see myself at the corner, out of focus, but clearly unimpressed. The caption asked whether people thought Sienna was wrong, or if some men just had fragile pride, followed by laughing faces and poll stickers. I saved the clip to my gallery and uploaded it to Archive A. As the uploading message flickered on and off the screen, a new notification slid over the top. Tess had created a new highlight titled Bar Drama and added both the original bet clip and the birthday toast to it. Watching my own strained expression flicker under a cartoon title, I understood that, in their world, the bet and my supposed meltdown had become content, and that content rarely disappeared on its own. The days after the birthday dinner felt oddly heavy, even though from the outside nothing dramatic happened. I still woke up early, made coffee, packed Maya's lunch, and went to the shop. Sienna still spent long stretches with her phone in her hand, posting jokes about relationships and owning your choices. Yet the air between us felt thinner, like a stretched plastic bag that could split without warning. On Sunday afternoon, I took Maya to the neighborhood park because I needed both of us to breathe somewhere that was not filled with screens and noise. The park was ordinary, with swings, a slide, and a few benches along a cracked path. Maya ran to the swings, and I began pushing her gently, watching the chains creak as her shoes reached for the sky. After a while, she asked if I had seen the videos her classmates' parents were showing each other. My stomach flipped, but I kept my voice calm and asked what she meant. She said some of the moms laughed about her mother being the queen of the bet, and about me being jealous and too serious. She wanted to know why people thought it was funny to say those things about her parents. I told her that some adults use jokes to avoid feeling guilty, and that those jokes say more about them than about us. She asked whether the things her mother did at the bar meant we were going to stop being a family. I said that whatever happened between the adults, she would still have a father who showed up and kept his word. I did not promise more than that, because I was no longer sure what I could guarantee. A few days later, we had a small family lunch planned at a quieter restaurant, this time mainly for relatives. Sienna said we should go to Smooth Things Over, but the way she said it made me think she meant smoothing over her image, not our marriage. The restaurant was calmer than the birthday place, with soft music and low conversations. Around our table sat Sienna, me, Nora, and Gareth, and a little later my parents, Marta and Jonah. As soon as we settled, Nora started talking about how modern women needed freedom and how some husbands tried to clip their wings. She said she had seen clips of the bet night and thought her daughter was brave for refusing to be shamed. She looked at me while she said it, though her words pretended to address the room. Sienna picked up the story and began retelling the bar incident, not as a joke this time, but as a sad tale of a woman trying to feel alive and a man who punished her for one harmless dance. She said I had sulked for days, refused to touch her, and made the house tense. There was no mention of the bet itself, of the concept of turning your marriage into a challenge to impress friends, or of the way she had described me to Evan. In her version, she was the one under attack. I listened, watching how easily the details rearranged themselves when she spoke. When there was a pause, Marta asked a simple question. She wondered whether humiliating a spouse in public, especially in front of cameras, could really be called harmless. There was a brief stillness at the table. Nora broke it by saying that what was truly harmful was emotional control, that making a woman feel guilty for dancing was a kind of cruelty. She added that some men use silence and sulking as weapons. It was clear which man she meant. I spoke quietly. I said there had been a bet, that Sienna had accepted it knowing cameras were on, and that I had heard Evan brag later about making a husband look foolish because of what she said to him. I did not raise my voice or use complicated words. I simply placed those facts on the table. Sienna shook her head and said I was twisting locker room talk, that men always exaggerated, and that clinging to this proved I was obsessed. Gareth stared at his plate as if the pattern in the china were suddenly fascinating. The couple who owned the restaurant brought our food, sensing tension but saying nothing. Maya, sitting beside my mother, picked at her fries without much interest. The meal ended without any real agreement. Nora left with Sienna and Gareth, still talking about how no daughter of hers would be controlled. My parents lingered in the parking lot. Marta hugged me and said quietly that she believed there was more to the story than Sienna admitted, and that I should think carefully about what kind of environment Maya was growing up in. Jonah put a hand on my shoulder and said that sometimes the best thing a man can do is stop trying to win arguments that are rigged from the start. He told me that if I chose to make formal changes, I should do it in a way that put Maya first and avoided yelling matches. Then they drove off, leaving me in the fading afternoon light with Sienna sitting silently beside me in the car, looking at her phone. At home, the split in the apartment became more visible in small ways. I gathered a few folded shirts and a pair of jeans and moved them into the guest bedroom wardrobe, making that room less like a storage space and more like a place where someone actually lived. Maya saw me carrying clothes and asked if I'd done something wrong. I said sometimes adults needed different rooms to sleep in when things were complicated, but that it did not mean I was leaving. She frowned, as if trying to measure the truth of my words, then nodded slowly. In the kitchen, 2 mugs began to claim fixed positions, mine near the coffee machine, Sienna's nearer the sink. It would have seemed trivial to an outsider, but to me it looked like a tiny map of 2 lives moving apart. On the wall above the small desk, our planner hung with its boxes for each day. Most squares still held simple notes about school events and work shifts, but one date a few weeks ahead remained blank. One evening, after everyone else had gone to bed, I stood in front of the planner with a pen and slowly drew a neat red circle around that date. I did not label it. I knew what it meant, and I knew I did not want Sienna asking questions about it yet. Under the planner, the desk had a drawer that now held 3 labeled binders: Home, Auto, Bank. Inside Home, between old lease agreements and insurance papers, I had begun slipping printed screenshots and a loose sheet where I wrote short notes about dates, clips, and conversations. The binder was not full, but it was heavier than before. When I heard footsteps in the hallway one night, I pushed the binder back into the drawer and turned the small key, feeling the soft click as it locked just before Sienna appeared in the doorway. She asked what I was hiding. I said it was just old paperwork, bills, and contracts. She said she might do an audit one day to see if I had a secret manifesto. I changed the subject by asking whether Maya had finished her homework. Later that night, I sat on the edge of Maya's bed again. She lay under her blanket, her stuffed animal tucked against her chest, eyes open in the half-dark. She asked in a quiet voice that shook a little whether I was going to leave like people said some dads did when they got tired. She said she had heard her grandmother telling Sienna that if I could not accept her as she was, Sienna should let me go. Maya had heard the words, "let him go," and thought they meant I might disappear. I felt something in my chest ache, but I kept my tone even. I told her that I would not walk away from her, that even if grown-ups had to change where they slept or how they organized their life, she would still have a father who stayed. As I spoke, my phone on the nightstand lit up with a new notification at the top of the screen. Just a preview from the follow-up message thread, a few words about confirming dates. I reached over and cleared it before she could read anything, then smoothed her hair until her eyelids finally closed. When I stepped into the hallway, the apartment was mostly dark, except for the faint light from the kitchen where I could hear cupboard doors opening and closing. A moment later, the front door latch clicked sharply as someone came in. Nora's voice floated down the hall, louder than the hour justified, telling Sienna she was not going to let her daughter live one more day under emotional blackmail, and I understood that the next fracture would not be private either. The week after Nora's late-night arrival felt like living in a house that had already cracked but had not yet fallen apart. I moved through the days like I always did, but there was a new stiffness in every small routine. Nora came by more often, always at odd hours, bringing Sienna little treats and big opinions. I heard them in the kitchen when they thought I was out of earshot, Nora saying that my silence was a kind of abuse, that Sienna should not have to beg for basic respect, and that if I kept punishing her, Sienna would be justified in doing whatever she wanted. Sienna agreed loudly enough for the words to reach the hallway. I did not walk in, did not argue, did not give either of them a fresh scene to cut into content. Instead, I took those conversations and added them to the invisible list in my head. Date, time, who was present, what was said. At night, when the apartment finally calmed, I sat at the small desk under the planner. The binders labeled Home, Auto, and Bank sat in the drawer, and next to them now lay a thin binder named Utilities that no longer held only bills. On my laptop, I opened a simple document and wrote a timeline in plain sentences. Rooftop bet and dance. First clip posted. Birthday dinner toast. Family lunch accusations. Late night visits from Nora. Timestamps, not commentary. When I finished, I printed the document. The printer clicked and then, oddly, spat out a blank page before the timeline came through. I picked up both sheets, placed the blank one on top, and slid them into a plastic sleeve. Then I opened the utilities binder and tucked the sleeve behind some electricity statements. The binder closed with a faint thud that sounded louder in the quiet room than it should have. On my phone, the message thread named Follow-Up had grown longer. There were short texts about dates, confirmation that videos had been saved, and suggestions about keeping everything in one place. One evening, standing in the dim apartment stairwell, I put on my headphones and took a call from the same emoji contact tied to the harbor room reminders. My voice stayed low as I described the latest events. The dinner, the family lunch, the way Sienna spoke about me online. I said I had video, audio, screenshots, and a written timeline. I said I was mostly concerned about Maya, about how much she had seen and heard. The voice on the other end asked calm questions, nothing dramatic. I answered carefully. We used simple phrases like consistent pattern, public humiliation, child's reaction, and future stability. When the call ended, I stayed in the stairwell a few extra seconds, listening to the hum of the building before going back up. Sienna's online presence also shifted. One day she posted a long caption under a photo of herself at the rooftop bar taken weeks earlier. In it, she wrote about living with a man who weaponized silence and punished her for being herself. She said some people pretended to be calm but used withdrawal as a way to control. She did not use my name, but everyone who knew us could recognize the picture she was painting. Nora commented that she was proud of her daughter for speaking her truth. Tess added a line about how no one should apologize for having fun. A few people I barely knew chimed in with heart emojis and clapping hands. Watching from my phone in the corner of the guest bedroom, I took screenshots of the post and comments, printed them, and filed them away. No long notes, just a date and a short description written in the margin with a black pen. Around that time, we received a notice from Maya's school about an optional parent session at the community center focused on communication during family changes. It was the kind of thing people usually attend when everyone senses a storm coming, but no one wants to say the word yet. Sienna rolled her eyes when she saw it and said it sounded like a waste of time, but later she told Tess she might go just to prove she was doing her part. I signed us up without a performance, simply marking the date on the planner and adding a small dot under the red circle that already stood there. On the evening of the session, we walked side by side down the community center hallway. The floor smelled like cleaning supplies and crayons. We sat on metal chairs outside a small room with a sign about families in transition. Other couples waited too, some sitting close, some far apart, like us. Sienna scrolled her phone, sending quick messages. At one point, I saw my name flash on the screen in a preview as she told Tess that she was being dragged into some weird mediation thing because I could not handle one dance. I did not comment. I watched the door instead. Inside, the session was short and neutral. The facilitator asked general questions about how conflict was handled at home. Sienna answered lightly that there was no real conflict, just a husband who could not laugh at jokes. I said, in plain words, that there had been repeated episodes where I was turned into a public punchline, and that our daughter had started to ask if families broke when adults wanted content. The facilitator's face tightened almost imperceptibly at that word. They reminded us that children should not carry adult narratives. Sienna smiled tightly and said she understood, though her eyes told a different story. When we left, she told Nora by text that the whole thing had been pointless, that the facilitator clearly sided with fragile men. I walked beside her through the parking lot, watching our reflections move in the car windows. Back at home, the distance between rooms turned into a kind of map. I slept in the guest bedroom almost every night now. The bed there no longer looked untouched. The sheets were slightly rumpled, my extra blanket folded at the foot. In the kitchen each morning, my mug sat clean and ready near the coffee machine, while Sienna's appeared and disappeared near the sink with varying levels of lipstick stains around the rim. The planner on the wall showed the same red circle, now closer with each passing day. A sticky note had appeared on the edge of the desk below it, written in my own handwriting, "Bring forms." It was small enough that Sienna never commented, or perhaps she saw it and decided it was not worth asking. One evening, when the sky outside the windows was the color of old steel, the simmering tension finally boiled over into something spoken. We were both in the kitchen, standing on opposite sides of the counter. I had just finished loading the dishwasher. She was scrolling through her phone again, visibly annoyed. She said she was tired of my constant quiet judgment, that my staying in the guest room was an immature punishment. She said if I wanted things to go back to normal, I needed to stop acting like a victim over a harmless bet and come back to our bed. I replied that I was not punishing anyone, that I was protecting myself from being turned into a joke over and over. I said it without raising my voice. I reminded her that the bet had not been just a silly moment, but a repeated story, recorded, edited, and used to make me look like a controlling fool. I said that watching her friends cheer while she painted me as a joke had changed something that could not be changed back with a shrug. She accused me of planning something behind her back, pointing to the locked drawer and the red circle on the planner. She said if I thought I could make her look like the bad person, she would fight back. The words hung in the air, heavy but not surprising. I leaned on the counter, looked at the planner, then back at her. I told her very clearly that I did not intend to make scenes, shout, or ruin her reputation with more stories. I said I was done trying to win arguments in front of audiences she had invited. I said there were proper ways to handle situations like ours, that structures existed for a reason, and that I would use them. I told her, in a voice that felt like it came from further inside me than usual, that I would handle this properly. For a heartbeat, the kitchen went completely quiet. Even the humming of the fridge seemed to dim. Sienna's face shifted from anger to something closer to unease as her eyes flicked to the red circle on the wall. At that exact moment, my phone on the counter lit up and started to vibrate. The screen showed a muted call from a private number, the word private glowing on the glass as the phone buzzed against the countertop, while the red-circled date stared back at both of us from the planner above it. The red-circled morning arrived with cold, clear light. At the school pickup loop, I stood by the fence while parents gathered in little knots. Sienna filmed herself, telling her followers she was co-parenting like a champ with a difficult husband. When the bell rang, Maya ran to me first, wrapping her arms around my waist. As Sienna approached, a man in a plain jacket stepped forward and asked her name. When she confirmed, he handed her a thick envelope. Petition for divorce, temporary orders, proposed custody schedule. While Nora sputtered nearby, I took Maya's hand and walked her calmly toward our car.